Hello and welcome, everybody. I see we're having a really good crowd today. That's exciting. We're excited to have everybody here for this October session of Conversation with Colleagues. And hold on. Okay, there we go. The Conversation with Colleagues is a part is supported by the Pedestrian and Bicycle Data Subcommittee, the ACP 70-2 for the Transportation Research Board. We're excited today. Today's topic, we've invited three great panelists to talk about long-term count programs. And I'm kind of excited about this. We focus so much on data quality and getting count programs set up and trying to figure out what we can do with data. We don't really think about what's the long-term implication, what happens after 5 years, after a decade. Equipment gets old, staff changes, a lot of challenges come up. And I think this is a great opportunity with some folks and some agencies that are now deep into that second decade of count programs to sort of learn what that looks like. Quick, just ground rules. We keep things very informal with the conversation to try and have interaction. I know there's a lot of us here, so it's good to have ground rules. We do want you to ask questions and also feel free to share experiences. Do respect your participants. Try to avoid interrupting. When you're not speaking, please do mute your line to get rid of background information. I'll be your facilitator today, along with William and Greg, who are part of the committee with me. We'll guide conversation. We do encourage you to turn on your video during Q&A for seeing each other, and then use the hand function if you'd like to be selected to speak or have comments. Also, questions and comments can be included in the chat. And please feel free to also include links or useful information that you have in the chat. We can collect all that stuff from the chat and share it with folks later. Again, I said I'm Tony Hall. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Conversation with Colleagues Planning Committee. We have also on the line Greg Lindsay and Will Rogers, who are with us. They'll help me out today. Nathan Hicks, who I don't believe Nathan's with us. I think he might be in the middle of some paternity issue. He was getting ready to have a child. So if he's not here, we wish the best to Nathan with that. Today's speakers, we have Josh Clark from SANDAG in San Diego, Cassidy Bullen with the DVRPC in Philadelphia, and David Patton from Arlington, Virginia. And just real quick, Josh is a senior active transportation planner at the SANDAG, and he leads SANDAG's active transportation data collection, evaluation, and monitoring program. Prior to rejoining SANDAG, which is not uncommon these days, he worked with Alta. Josh previously represented Council 3 on the City of San Diego's Bicycle Advisory Board, was co-chair of the San Diego chapter of APBP, good plug for the great organization. He has a BA in history from UCLA and a master's in city planning from San Diego State. He rides a 1978 Trek single speed to Padres games and a 2020 Rad City 3 with his kids' seats to elementary and work. It's always good to be able to be proud of the good bikes we have. Cassidy Bullen is the Associate Manager of the Office of Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning at DVRPC in Philadelphia. She has a Master's of City Planning from the University of Pennsylvania. She began her time with DVRPC back in 2010 and since worked in a variety of projects, including access plans for transit stations, a variety of bicycle and pedestrian facility design projects. Her current work includes managing regional cyclical bicycle and pedestrian count program, developing a bike plan for Trenton, and leading projects under DVRPC's experimental pop-ups program. Finally, last and not least, of course, David Patton has been a bicycle pedestrian transportation planner with Arlington County, Virginia for 16 years. His duties include managing a fleet of 40 automated counters for bikes and pedestrians in coordination with National Park Service, Virginia Department of Transportation, Northern Virginia Regional Parks, and the District of Columbia. The first of the Arlington counters was installed 15 years ago. Most of the counters are installed at trail and bridge locations. Prior to coming to Arlington, David was the statewide bicycle and pedestrian planner for Virginia DOT in the Richmond Central office. David has a master's degree from Rensselaer and a BS from UC Berkeley. He is a California native who lives in Washington, D.C. And with that, I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Josh to get us started for our three presentations. You should, oh, hold on.
Excellent.
Cool. Did you get the screen there?
I did, yeah, excellent. All right. Okay, friends, 1 second. I am not entirely sure this is the one that I want, but I'm going to find my way over to it here. 1 second. I think I lost my... Excellent. I think we're good to go. In presenter mode now for you all?
It's in preview mode.
Oh, okay.
We'd like to thank the good folks at Zoom who make all these updates all the time and change the functionality between every single session.
Yeah, sorry everyone. We're in presenter mode now, I trust.
Yes, looking good.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. All right, sorry for the delay. It's really nice to be with you all today. Honestly honored. Great panelists and a great crew. So talking about my favorite topic, as mentioned. So I got 5 lessons learned here, and I'll talk a little bit about the program to start, and we'll talk about how important consistent funding is. So at SANDAG here, the San Diego Regional MPO and COG, we've got a bike ped and neighborhood safety transnet sale. This is a sales tax measure that will last until 2050. So luckily, we're good on the consistent funding front. And a small portion of that, 1% of the 2% of the half-cent sales tax, I can use for the fleet of automated bike and ped counters. So that's just like $60K for specifically the bike and ped counter and reinstallations that I'm going to talk about that we've done and continue to do. And all of this is because we had a commitment to build out about 77 miles of bikeways back in 2012. So here is that full regional network. And then the solid lines are the areas where I'm either doing short counts or doing longer duration counts. And there's many active projects that we've got going on. So this is very exciting, but also has some challenges that we'll talk about. So number 2, have a manageable fleet of counters. So I've got a pad response here at SANDAG that is no new counters. And I love the counters that we have, know them so intimately, but I don't want to take on any more. So that is something that I've had to tell everyone as we do every new project. Sorry, we're not doing new counters. We're sticking with the nice longitudinal data set at the sites that we've been monitoring for 14 years nearly. So yeah, the counter network at first was not a manageable network for one agency. We got some funds to put out 54 counters at approximately 37 locations, but there was no recurring funding. There was no long-term ownership and maintenance responsibilities. So in the last 12 years, we've had this process of kind of giving splitting these counters up between the jurisdictions in the region, and this has now got six different agencies that maintain that original set of counters, and everyone doing such a great job that we've even been able to add a couple of counters as people get more confident with it. So this is the number of count sites in bold is the number that each of these partners owns and maintains now, and then the number of the non-bolded number is how many of these count sites are actively counting. So you can see here that still there's a bit of a challenge. Obviously, it's a challenge to have all counters counting all the time. But yes, I would say in a large region, just don't bite off more than you can chew. All right, so I said no new counters, but that doesn't mean that I won't count new projects. So we've got a mobile multi, which has been very, very helpful, of course, because then I can say back to the project managers, okay, sorry, no, I'm not going to put a counter on your project. Your project's awesome though, and we're going to be out there counting for as soon as it opens and for as long as we want with the selected tubes on an eco multi, for example. Those tubes have like a field lifespan of about 3 months. So the far right location here, we've already replaced the tubes, and we'll just keep it out there for a little while and get counts. So yeah. Picking good locations. Many of you already have your locations. You've already inherited a program. I inherited many locations. They are very good, but I've reinstalled a lot of the counters. So I get to choose maybe a different spot at roughly the same location. So these are the count sites. I mentioned 13 counters that SANDAG maintains. They're all over the region, and you can see that it's especially 13 sensors, and then we pair them up as corridors to report. And So obviously we are counting on the SANDAG projects, which is very helpful because here is a separated bikeway where we had a counter before in a bike lane, before that just on the roadway. So this is the third time we've reinstalled at this location, and we're kind of roughly in the same area. But for this project, which is again was a SANDAG project, I can just get in there, talk to the project manager, say like, hey, can I get into your construction drawings and just add these loops here and put a construction note that's just basically like, hey, contractor, your signal subs just needs to buy the components and then talk to Sandag, and we'll go out there together, confirm with EcoCounter, for example, with the diagrams here, and then go out on site and reinstall. And this has been hugely helpful as opposed to trying to get a right-of-way permit and get this all figured out with an agency. Since it's our project, our counter, easy to buy new equipment and get it out there and installed. So very fortunate in that respect. So obviously and same idea, right? We've all talked before about what makes a really good counting site. Bottlenecks, of course, getting everyone funneled to one location, but also accessibility. So here we've got to reinstall a counter, and we get to pick which side of the bridge, right? So it's important that we're choosing the side that has access, because obviously we want to bike and we want to ride our bikes or walk everywhere that we can, but we're also going to need to get a big truck in here. We're not going to be able to get over the bridge in it, but we will want to get out there and do the maintenance. So the convenience and accessibility for the crew going out there, you and whoever else you got on your team, is critically important. So that's what I mean by, if you got to reinstall, you do have some latitude in choosing where you install, knowing that you'll be back approximately every 6 months for many years to come at that site. So the fourth is institutionalize it. Obviously, we then use our data for reporting, and here's our annual state of the commute report. So everyone is waiting for us for 2024, of course. This is very nice because this is like a foundational part of the work that we do at the agency. Every annual state of the commute report next year, someone's going to reach out to me in March, be like, hey, we need the new stacked histogram for 2024. And it's very nice that we can say, we have our program as part of the mandated scope of the agency in reporting out the annual bike traffic. What's the fifth lesson learned here is all about teammates. And I think your team has got to include someone that loves dirt and loves data. And ideally, you are the person that loves both of those things. So on my team here, lucky to have Fair and Peers under a professional services contract to help us with a lot of our data cleaning. And so obviously, we're pulling data from EcoCounter via EcoVisio. We're cleaning it. We're re-uploading it. We're making sure the correction factors are good, doing validation studies, a lot of really tough analytical work, reconstructing data, for example, that I really rely on the Fair and Peer staff. So talented, very, very, very competent to assist with this. And so that's very useful. That's the data part. Then there's the dirt part. So I'm very lucky to be joined by the gentleman who drives this truck in the photo here. This is a landscape technician that works on the Sandag toll road that Sandag bought. So luckily, we've got at least two folks there that are dedicated landscape technicians that are very good at doing reinstallations or troubleshooting or doing field work effectively with me. And so I'm very grateful for that. So I've got two titles for this slide. I'm at the end of my time here, but this is fun. So this is either called All Ages and Abilities, Eco Multi-Installations, or CSI San Diego. So if we look at the first photo, this is 12 years worth of issues that I've had at one location, right? So the first one, a wooden post, very pretty. Should have always been an urban post or a stainless steel enclosure. So we go out there, we see someone's knocked it over, someone stole the components. Okay, it's theft. Let's put this controller cabinet and we'll mod it up. That's the middle picture. And we'll put the components in there and we'll count there. We'll drill holes. We'll do the pyros and we'll just kind of mod one up and it'll be, bomb proof. Except that it looks like someone ran into that. So that middle picture, you can see it's dented in. Somebody, again, could open this up then, steal the components, shoot. What are we going to do? We're going to fully protect it with bollards. So here we are in the final condition. We put retractable bollards out there so that no one in a landscaping truck can reverse into it anymore. And these are obviously lessons hard learned, but kind of wish we would have who knew we needed this bomb-proof third installation, but here we are now, with a good final install at a tough remote site. So that's it for me.
Right.
We got time
Thank you,
for
Josh. That's great. I will I do see
Tony.
some questions. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, Greg, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you have time for questions now? I was gonna read the questions in the chat.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna cue Will to do that, but if you'd like to go ahead and we'll do a couple of minutes of questions for Josh, and then I also will encourage all the panelists as the questions are coming in, if you want to also just use the chat sometimes to respond to some of the more just arbitrary ones. But go ahead, Greg.
Okay, three questions, Josh. One is, given the devolution of responsibility for maintenance of the counters, how is data collection managed and shared across the jurisdictions? The second one is, your reports with histograms publicly available? And the third is, can you talk about validation when you download data from EcoCounter and reanalyze before you put it back up and complete your analyses?
Yeah, no problem. So for number one, we clean all the data and then upload it to an open data portal. So that also answers number two. I can put a link to that, and that has a widget so you can download the data. And then we feel very confident about the QA/QC data. So we're not routinely using the Eco Public Map, for example, to showing the real time data. We certainly I've always been very adamant about reviewing, ensuring the consistency of the data, and then publishing it. So there's some pluses and minuses there, but that is then how I feel very comfortable sharing it out to everyone, jurisdictions or beyond, at the end of every calendar year. So by May in the state of the community, the previous year's data would be available. And then for the validation studies, for pulling down the data, reviewing, we're looking for those so now okay, so we're looking for outlier anomalies, 3 times greater than normal, and then zeros, effectively flagging those anomalies, looking to see if there's anything that could have attributed to it, group rides, etc. Make sure the data is good. Impute data, reconstruct data from a reference counter if needed for areas with zeros. Sometimes a loop gets cut, or there's a temporary traffic control, and so it's not an accurate reflection of the people that are riding bikes or not there. It's usually equipment malfunction. So we're cleaning that data. And then, of course, we have done a validation study on all of our sites. So we have a constant correction factor to then apply to that site, very site-specific and flow or directional specific. Then it's that final uploaded data with the correction factor applied, which gives us the total bike counts for the year that makes its way into that stacked histogram for the state of the commute report.
Excellent. Well, thanks. And I will encourage folks to continue even, obviously we'll have discussion after the 3 presentations, so don't hesitate to ask further questions to Josh about Sandag. Right now, Cassidy, I'll hand it over to you to talk about DVRPC. Go ahead and want to share your screen. Thanks.
Okay, so today I'm sharing information from both my position and sort of the planning side of our agency, but also our Office of Travel Monitoring, who is in charge of doing the actual collecting of the data. So a little background just to kind of put mine in perspective compared to Josh's. We're a bi-state MPO. We have 9 counties and 352 municipalities. So that's a very large area to try to get our arms around. We have the city of Philadelphia, of course, which probably has the most biking in our region. So we have permanent counters, our first kind of bin to talk about. We started with 12 of those funded by William Penn Foundation. And over time, we've added another 6-ish. I say ish because they're not always super reliable and when they're collecting data. Over time, we've sorry, those are primarily on our trail network. William Penn Foundation was particularly interested in us monitoring activity on a regional trail network. We do have 2 that are on street. So I think, like Josh, certainly when it comes to permanent counters, I think OTM would say no new counters. But we probably would like, a couple more in street, just so that we can have a correction factor that might be in street specific versus blended between in street and trail. Our short duration counters, we have a relatively ton of those. We have 50 plus that do both bicycle and motor vehicles, 14 bicycle only, and roughly 27. So we just got some new ones of those. And all of that is definitely ongoing in terms of the counters themselves. Obviously, they don't last forever. Like I said, we just bought a bunch of new pedestrian ones. Also, in terms of data collection, all of our permanents automatically upload to the cloud. All of our short duration counters are uploaded. We upload that data when we collect them from the field. So I think there's a number of things over time we've planned for or planned for as best as we can. Obviously stuff like this is going to have maintenance. For the permanent counters, our estimate is it's about $9,700 annually, or about $540 per year per site. That's in addition to the time and labor that our full staff of counter or travel monitoring counters put into checking sites, doing any maintenance if necessary. If the counter's not counting as we expect, or if there's an issue with the cloud server, those kinds of things. There's also a labor component to housing the data. So we house all of our own data, and we house some data from counters owned by partners as well. But I think we've kind of positioned ourselves as the data holders for the region. And I think a lot of this kind of evolved relatively naturally, given that we also do all these things on a much bigger scale for the vehicle side. So we have existing relationships with PennDOT, where they pay us money to do a lot of this stuff for vehicles. So adding on the bikes and pads was sort of a natural evolution of that, and all the staff, when a lot of those staff were already on board. The replacement, at least a lot of our first gen equipment, the batteries went out about every 2 years, no rechargeable option. The new counters we just got from Evo, the Evo counters from Eco Counter, those are supposed to have a 10-year battery. So they're plus side there on maintenance. So in addition to all of that maintenance we might have planned for, especially at the beginning, I think there's a lot of maintenance that's come up that we wouldn't have expected. As I mentioned, our permanent counters have a subscription fee, but now Eco Counter will also be adding a subscription fee for all equipment, whether or not it's doing automatic data upload. And all of those subscriptions we are estimating will be an annual cost of about $17,000. So that's just to get the data from the stuff. When it comes to repairing and replacing any components, most of the vendors are, it's proprietary. So there is a pretty kind of fixed opportunity to replace and repair, whether it means sending stuff back to France or whatever it might be. We're kind of stuck in having the costs that they quote us. There's not a lot of really opportunities to look for better options. As this program has grown, both a little bit on the permanent side, but also on the short duration side, we have had to hire one new staff member to do all the things related to the bike ped data. There definitely are a lot more quirks, I would say, to the bike ped data compared to the vehicle data. So having a specialized person who's very familiar with that has been really beneficial. For all of our traffic count techs, we have the ongoing costs of vehicular leases. And that, really, I think only one other person at our agency has vehicles, so it's not something we do regularly. So that really took a while to kind of figure out, especially when doing a full replacement. Also, OTM has estimated that over the time that we've had our permanent counters, we've probably doubled the original purchase price costs to fix and repair the units. So that could be because of animal or weather damage, damage because of municipal staff mowing or plowing, other construction damage, and also, people seem to really want to vandalize these sometimes. So there's a lot of things to have to repair and replace. The other thing that Josh sort of mentioned is, we made our best guess when we placed, especially the permanent counters initially. And over time, we haven't really gotten the data we expected, either because of repeated damage, blockage, or electromagnetic interference. You can talk to Jonathan after about the cemetery that's never correctly counted anything. So I think there comes questions about, well, what do you do with that equipment once it's in, but we can't really use it anymore? Do we just retire it but leave it? I think, those are ongoing questions. And I think overall we far from answered kind of the question posed to this conversation today. So that's all like the stuff. So then thinking about, particularly, I'll talk about our two cyclical bicycle and pedestrian counting programs. The bicycle one started in 2015. We have, 135 or 20 to 135 number of locations. We count those every 3 years. This selection method was just kind of asking our partners, where should we count? And then counting, which has pros and cons. I think the overall issue we're finding, especially for these cyclical programs, is the question that I think Liz put in the chat of like, who's using this and how? And I think especially when our funding is driven by board requests, if the counties aren't saying, oh, I use this in this process, I always look at it, I'm sharing it with elected officials, whatever it might be, it is hard to justify maintaining these programs. So one of the things we did recently is create this story map. Part of the goal was just to remind our audience and our partners that this program exists. And then also the goal was to say, okay, if this is a longitudinal program, we've had it for almost 10 years, what can we say now? Like, we should be able to say something. What can we start to look at the data and say? So we did look at some questions about, what can we tell about here? We're looking at employment centers. We also looked at facility type. I think because this program was developed just by asking folks, where should we count? Whether it's representative, I think it's a different question. And I think we also found that it told us, the review of the program told us some things we maybe wouldn't want to have heard. Unlike Josh, the number didn't just continue to trend up. So we had a dip after COVID. That's not necessarily something you want to put a press release out about. On the pedestrian side, we started this program in 2019. We did this method, or the selection on this, completely differently. So we wanted to do something that was driven by statistical analysis. We used a process outlined in, I think, an NC State report that said, okay, you could generate these pedestrian estimates and then use these estimates as input for a regression analysis. That regression analysis should tell you the most significant variables. We did that, and with those variables, we developed a number of strata. We did different strata for the suburban counties and the city of Philadelphia. And now that we're a couple years in, we've found some surprising outcomes. For instance, we found that, looking at this slide, the strata of above median boards and lights and below median boards and lights were not significant. We also found in the suburban counties, that schools was not a significant strata, and that not all of the variables that went into the census tract-based strata were significant. So I think for a longitudinal program, I think this introduces some very interesting questions. And that's kind of on top of that question of like, who's going to use this data and how? So that is very much something we're doing right now. Both of these reviews, but particularly on the bike side, we found that we weren't necessarily always looking each year that the data we thought was being collected was collected and was valid. So we found that a lot of the data over the whatever 10 so years of the bike program, not all of it was usable in that analysis. That reduced the number of locations we could include in that summary. So we're working on some automatic QA QC checks, but that'll be something we definitely will hope to do better in the future. I touched on this pedestrian one. I think, we're going to try a few different things about recategorizing location sites. But, I think one of my bosses said, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. And maybe we asked questions that we didn't exactly want the answers to. But I think our big overarching question for the bike ped side is really like, how do we show the value if this doesn't feed into some discretionary grant program? What do we tell partners to do with it? And how do we get them to actually ask us to do this? Not just, the odd project here or there, but these real cyclical, more research focused potentially projects. Okay.
Wow, thanks, Cassie, so much. And it's definitely generating a lot of chat in Q&A discussion. Very fascinating to think about just all the unanticipated challenges as the program evolves. And they're there, so it's very interesting. I think we have a large group. We have a lot going on, so I'm going to go ahead and cue David now to run through his presentation. Keep the questions and comments going in the chat box, and then I'll tap William and Greg in at the end of this, and we'll sort of run through to make sure we address specific comments. We've got 58 participants right now, so it's going to be a little more difficult just to do like back and forth conversation. So we'll just moderate through the chat box if that's okay. So David, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away and tell us what's going on with Arlington.
I will do that. Hope I do this seamlessly. Let's see. Not doing too well yet. Where's my screen? Oh, dang on it. There we go. Nope. I'm a little bit lost. I'm sorry.
You go back down and try to share screen and then select the one that's there from the bottom.
Screen. And then select. Is this working now? Not yet. And now try share again. Now that should work.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going to go into, sorry for my.
No, that's okay. You're in the preview.
Go into slideshow mode here. Well, hi there. It's great to be here. Boy, I learned a lot from those first two presentations, Josh and Cassie. Thank you very much. I think we're all more or less in the same boat. My name is David Patton. I work in Arlington County, Virginia. We're right across the river from DC. We've been doing automatic continuous counters for 15 years, almost entirely with eco counter equipment. We had a little bit of activity with Metro Count for a while. Get a couple things out of the way. Funding has not been a problem for our program, the size that it is. We use all local money, and it found that the data sells itself. We use the data internally. We're a little bitty jurisdiction, and we do some cool things with our data. We work with our local MPO in Washington Council of Governments, and I'm only going to touch on data a little bit and mostly talk about the stuff in the weeds. So I really appreciate the photos, or the people in the bushes, or as I say, in the trenches with the wrenches. So now how do I go down? Oh, there we go. A little bit about us. Here's a map of our county. We're a little bitty jurisdiction, 26 square miles, smallest county in Virginia. We behave kind of like a city, although we're not officially a city. It's great to have really nice looking regular data like on the upper right, lower middle, big aggregate piles of data that all look very consistent and coherent. That's great to see. And then just brag a little bit. We've been called a platinum level walk friendly community, and this year we cracked into the gold level bike friendly community rankings with LAB. So fleet of 40 continuous counters. I call this risks and rewards, right? You have to give this a flashy title, but let's just dig into it a little bit. This is the kind of thing you see from time to time. What's going on here? Bugs. Bugs got into the lens of the pyro, clogged it up, so the pedestrian channel went blank for a few days. What do you do with that? Automatic correction, or do you get in there and manipulate the spreadsheet tables? Bugs, floods, birds pecking out lenses, all the kinds of things that you all have, that Josh and Cassidy have mentioned. One of the larger issues that I've been faced with, well, I all have, is that the eco counter software doesn't allow an easy way to flag known anomalies in the data. So everybody's working around that limitation. And a shout out to Kristen Nordbeck, who's on the call, and Sarisha in Portland, and Sarah Belden, who's one of our people on the ground, helping with the field work. You know, human-induced damage too. Whether it's you know, somebody with a piece of construction equipment, or maybe it's a drunk driver, I don't know, or somebody with a sledgehammer who did $5,000 worth of damage to our eco display there. And the same person who was then arrested did $30,000 worth of damage to parking meters. Walking around downtown Roslyn, which was a little bit like a mini Manhattan, with a sledgehammer, smashing stuff, and it took him a couple of months to find the guy. So not fun there. Oh gosh, I'm getting out of sync. Oh, and then, so then just a word about data. So stuff shows up in the data. What the heck is going on here? You know, that is not 4 identical 15-minute periods with 144 pedestrians going back and forth, unless it's like an aerobics class or something. Very unlikely. And then the next day, 177 pedestrians in a single 15-minute period. Also not ideal, not real. So these kinds of things, hardware issues, natural disasters, data issues. And Cassidy especially mentioned the technology ages out. This is a dashboard that we created in-house, well, under contract, more than a decade ago. We've been using it to host our data and that of surrounding jurisdictions, Arlington, Alexandria, Washington, Montgomery County, Prince George's County. It's aged out. It's all based on old programming. I'm not a data guy. I mean, I'm not a software guy. I don't know how to fix it. So we're going to boost this whole thing onto a new platform that needs to be mobile friendly. And again, I'm looking to the actual people who write code and stuff to help us do that. We're not there yet. It's a sore spot right now. We need to upgrade, and we're not there yet. So this is the fun part. This is when stuff doesn't work right. What do you do? So here's one of our counters. Very happy about this one. This is a cast iron lamppost on Memorial Bridge. Memorial Bridge connects Arlington with the National Mall in DC. People run into this cast iron lamppost. It's been hit twice, and somebody jumped the curb nearby and went through the granite baluster of the bridge and cost, I don't know, $1 million worth of damage. Took the Park Service 2 years to fix it. In the meantime, they blasted the antenna of my counter. So I have to go in there and find a $12 replacement antenna and hope that nobody got badly hurt in this collision. But there was a serious smash. They, dislodged the luminaire up on the top of this historic cast iron lamppost. I don't know how this stuff happens. And people walk away from it. The bridge carries about 60,000 vehicles a day. So it's a very busy location. It's not a great place to go there and work. And we get, 4, 5, 6,000 pedestrians and bikes a day. And when you can't wait around for a manufacturer to solve something, you have to do it yourself. So before EcoCounter made a Trex post that had a pocket inside for a ray gel connector, so you could have a little pigtail from the pyro, we made our own. Go in there with a drill and a chisel and make a little pocket for the ray gel connector, so that inevitably, when you have to replace the post, you don't automatically lose the pyro. I've replaced more concrete and more posts than I care to. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. And the thing on the right is camouflage. We haven't had a lot of problem with vandalism, a little bit here and there. Put a high voltage sticker on it, you're likely to repel some people who might otherwise want to see what's inside that cage. Another little innovation, before EcoCounter made a mobile multi, we built our own. So on the left there is a Home Depot 5-gallon bucket with concrete and a post and a pyro. And those 2 counters there are actually from Metric. They were a good partner for us in the early days. And same as the mobile multi, you count all the warm bodies, subtract the bikes, get an approximation of the pedestrians. That was done for the Park Service on the Arlington side of the river at a tricky place called Memorial Circle. It's my least favorite place to visit in the county. It's got a lot of traffic, a lot of out-of-town visitors. There's been fatal collisions, and the Park Service was studying this to see what they could do about it, and they called us for help. The lower right is what we do in trail locations where we don't want to go in with a big truck and a big pavement saw. We use a mobile electric wall cutter, runs on a generator, vacuum sucks the dust out, and it has a very small footprint. So we can go into a trail location that's well off the street, not near power, not near water, and we can cut loops like that. And then here's my tip of the day. So if you're going to put a post in the ground, you need it to be firm. And the eagle counter, the lower lens of the eagle counter pyro wants to be 31.5 inches off grade. And the post wants to be vertical in both dimensions. So I use this 2x4s and clamps. And the new solution is, rather than using ready-mix concrete, which is hard as heck to break up when the time comes, use round river stones about the size of small potatoes and pack them with a sand mix. It's mostly sand and a little bit of cement, and wet it down. And it's plenty firm enough to anchor a post. And when it comes time to take it out, you break it up with a sledgehammer. It's no big deal. Bop, bop, bop. The post comes out, you pull it out of the ground, and you're done. And then you can replace your equipment, which we've all done plenty of times. It's not a lot of fun, but this is a real good method. And now the fun, now the payoff. So why do we do all this? And why do people support us doing this? Well, we get to do really cool projects. This is the lower end of what's called the Custis Trail in Arlington. It connects downtown Roslyn, if you will, with the W&OD Trail about 4 miles away. And the W&OD is one of the country's first rail-to-trail conversions. It's 45 miles long. It goes from Arlington all the way out into rural Loudoun County and carries lots of people. It's a big, long, linear regional park. Well, at the lower end of it, it's in a downtown urban area on a very busy bridge approach to DC. We have a cluster of counters there. So we could effectively make the argument that this trail deserved to be widened at the expense of that road there, which is US 29. I don't know anywhere else in the country where a piece of US highway was vacated in favor of a trail expansion. But that happened here. About half a mile, a little more than a half mile of a lane of Lee Highway was given for trail improvements. And the top two pictures are before and during construction of that trail project. The bottom two pictures are before and during construction of the Memorial Bridge reconstruction, which was a National Park Service project done with the Assistance Corporation of Federal Highways, $225 million. And they made room in their construction schedule for us to put in permanent counters on the sidewalks. And as I said earlier, they're virtually invisible. They have a little puck antenna on the outside of the lamppost. Results are paying for the results are selling themselves, is what I'll say. They're not paying for this, they're selling themselves. We had to, and one more word about the technology aging out. A couple of years ago, we had to upgrade. I know Matthew Dorfman's on the call from EcoCounter. Hi, Matthew. We had to upgrade all of our counter technology to 4G cell technology because all of our devices have modems that call the mothership every morning. $60,000. So that was an unanticipated cost when we bought the equipment the first time. But EcoCounter has been a great partner through all of this. Their service people on the phone are top notch. They are in Montreal. They're not going to come and wipe your nose for you. They're not going to come and change a battery. Maybe in Minneapolis, they're not so far away. But for me to bring them down to Virginia, it's a round trip plane flight. So we learned to do a lot of things ourselves, and it's been a lot of fun. And one more sort of postcard shot. This is at the end of the Custis Trail in Roslyn. This is at the far eastern end of the Custis Trail. Roslyn is becoming a very urban place, very built up, very illuminated. It's happening, and the county is now developing right there what's called Gateway Park. It's been in place for a long time. There's going to be a new Gateway Park. It's being designed by the same people who did the High Line in New York City field operation. So that's entering its final phase of public comment now. It's going to go to construction pretty soon. So that's it for me. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, David. That was, yeah, this is, I think all three of these presentations, there's so many things to pull away from this. And it makes me realize is probably a need to start guidance about sustaining these programs and the long-term implications. So many of these things unanticipated when we start to plan count programs, and so many bearings on the resources and things we need to budget for those. I'm going to ask Will in a second. Will, if you're still there, to comb through the questions to see if there's some things that we still need to answer. But first, I see Scott Brady has his hand up there. And since he has some background also with DVRPC, Scott, go ahead and jump in if you have something.
Just 2 points. The first one happened to be a lot of people have been putting in the chat box about site selection. And I just wanted to throw in 2 cents on that. I've talked with a lot of professionals in this area who say, well, how do you find the sites that are going to give you the highest volumes? The idea of a counting program is not to find the sites that have the highest volumes. When FHWA establishes their coverage counts for vehicles, they don't only count interstates and freeways, they count all different classifications. You want a broad brush approach. The same way with bike and ped. You want to have a sampling of different types. Here in Honolulu, we have quite a few locations on street. And that's my other point. One of the things that I didn't hear, but for those of you who are looking to get into bike lane counting, etc., it kind of hit me upside the head when they came through and repaved. When they mill it, they dredge up your loops. So one of the things to do is, if your area, and most DOTs have it, or county planning departments, etc., is a roadway management system, and you will have a database with that. We have one called Lokahi. Anything on or in the roadway is in Lokahi with GPS location. This way, and then there's legislation which says you come through and you damage it, a utility, a contractor, whatever, you dredge it up, you're responsible for replacing it. Now, that doesn't work on repaving because one city department can't turn to another one and say, hey, get out there. But it does work with utilities and with contractors. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and that coordination, actually, after seeing David's presentation, I feel we could almost have a whole session just on some of the unbelievable horror stories of anything that can and will go wrong with your counters out in the field. Will, you want to go ahead and let us maybe pull up anything from the chat to offer up some questions to the panel?
Yeah, Liz was asking any unique ways that data customers are using the data. I think we saw the counters are selling themselves, and there's ways to track it. Anything out of the ordinary that you guys might be doing that other programs are not?
I'll take a stab at that. It's not really anything I did here in Arlington, but we because we made our data widely accessible, I got an inquiry from folks in England. These were lighting researchers at University of Manchester, I think, and they could go to our data and study the delta that happened around those days when the time change happens, and estimate volumes before and after the time change, before and after it got dark in the evening. They did a very innovative study. It got published several years ago. The fellow's name is Utley, Uttley. I forget where it was published. So that was one. And then in the near aftermath of COVID, the American Insurance Institute for Highway Safety used our data and wrote a published paper about the impact of COVID. They're based in Virginia. Wrote an impact of COVID on our bike and ped numbers, and that was published. So innovative use of data because it's out there.
Yeah, that's cool, David. And you're going to have to hit us with the link to that England time change study, because I've always been curious about that. EcoCounter recently helped us with a study for Bike Anywhere Day, as you all celebrate too, to see how much of an impact that had on trips on the Thursdays before, Thursdays after, the weekend before and after. And so it was good. It was interesting to see there was an appreciable uptick, of course, but didn't really hold. So this has been useful for us. And they also used some of the pit stop short duration counts to kind of look at more of the network. So that was something that's been recent and very neat. Figured I'd share.
Yeah, good
Then
stuff. And I actually, Cassie, I know you had also mentioned a little bit about, I don't want to call it the politics, but getting to the idea of sort of who's using the data gets to the site selection. And I think, even with Scott's comments, there isn't. It's. I don't think account program is about a democracy and trying to please people. It's actually trying to objectively monitor what's happening. And I'm just wondering some advice to sort of help agencies think about how to be constructive and objective, and at the same time productive with count programs.
I guess anything that requires the use of the data seems to be, good. So I think at one point we chatted internally about, if someone gets a transportation alternative set aside grant, can we force them to do before and after counts? The answer was no, it doesn't really seem like we could. But I think anything that forces a user to interact with this data, I think the bike ped stuff, it's just like we're just don't make data driven decisions, at least not really in the Philadelphia region. So I think we see a lot more interest on the trail counts because, especially in our suburban counties, it's just so much easier to do trails. They make more sense there. So I think it can be hard, especially at a regional level, with so many different folks to have equal value. I think the city of Philadelphia probably tends to be interested in their data. But again, I don't know that they're actively then using it to do anything. So, I think we can say interesting things with it, but I just don't know that the politics are right for any sort of political intervention or political consequence as a result of that. I think some of the other things we have talked about or we wanted to do is with this what we hoped was going to be a representative pedestrian program is that we could then make some estimates about, okay, if a sidewalk is in this sort of census tract, we think the level of magnitude would be this. We haven't gotten there yet. And I think also for us, we do a lot of modeling, but our modelers have never been able to incorporate the data into the model. So that's all real doom and gloom, but I think, we're trying to get there. I think it's just challenging.
No, I think everybody here who works this way, they're used to hearing that. And that brings one question, and I think, and this is not from the chat, but I'm curious too with the three, and any of you can respond to this, but as the program matures, we talk about it does focus on where you can count. A lot of times that's trails and other things. Have any of your programs started to either coordinate or integrate with the other traffic monitoring program to integrate like on-street data collection, or are you working just somewhat independently and the bike ped stuff is in its own house? I know there's a lot of complication there, but I'm curious just sort of, if there's any wins or experiences from any of the three programs.
Jonathan, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I would say there are other folks here that probably can bring in some insight there.
Can you repeat that again, please? All right, but before you do that, for one, I actually took over for Scott's permanent counter program, and I do blame him for all my problems. So the stuff that we have, to answer a few questions, if you're going to pick your selections, the best thing to do is get a reliable mobile counter and move it around to the spots that you want. We helped the health department pick out a few spots, and essentially they had 6 overall, but they wound up picking 3, and we left the data down for, I think, 3 weeks. And then they bought Eco Counter Pyro version 2 counters, pedestrian ones, because it was a pedestrian mainly program, and then they left them out there with automatic data recording. To further that, you want to make sure that you have funding for now and in the future and after you're gone, because the word permanent should be an indicator that this will be around for a while, but that somehow gets lost, the funding source, after 2 to 4 years. To answer some of the other questions, just going through all the stuff I saw. When we pick locations for our mobile counters, it depends on the project. The person who's asking for the counts asks for the counts. And then we go into our database and I just put them in. They could be one-offs. They could never be counted again. If it is a recurring site, they do get station IDs for the cyclical program. I believe they have station IDs, and that would become what you're usually more used to with your DOTs and their vehicular counts. They'll take the same count, the same location, barring a massive change in infrastructure or other issues. And you do it every 3-5 years or so. So I don't really know. I saw that message. I wasn't quite sure how to ask it, but it just goes into the database. And then, like anything else, you want to make sure that your data is valid. Validation on the permanent counters. We've used cameras. We just put them out. And then literally I've watched the video. Again, another quirk I've picked up from Brady of watching my own video and then validating the counters them myself. And they're pretty accurate. Eco counter overall, for this few minutes I have here, fairly accurate for what you're putting out there if installed correctly and everything. So, and then I forgot what was the other thing that I got roped into this for. Tony, I'm kind of talking directly to you.
I think you covered it.
All right.
Yeah.
The main thing is Josh's beginning was perfect. Stuff's gonna get broken. You got to figure out how to put it back. David said the same thing too. Bees, people, like it breaks. You got to have staff to know what they're doing. Put it out there. You got to know how long it's going to take you to get out there. We have counters that they're not working. They haven't worked for a while. The dance you do at municipalities comes into play. We have permanent counter bike only ones on Pine and Spruce in the city. They are the only ones in the city. They are fantastic. It took 5 years. I think it might be what chased Brady out of Philadelphia to Hawaii. The point is the same things that come up. What happens when you repave the road? That was a major sticking point with the streets department. When the streets department or other people come through and put in new concrete around the counter, could we purposely pick ones that were broken so we didn't have to pay to have it replaced? Because that was thousands of dollars to do that on top of the cost. But they came through and put a thin veneer of concrete over the sensor itself, which we had to take off. So there is all this that goes on. You have to be able to be dirty. You have to be able to do it yourself. You have to kind of MacGyver everything as you go along. And then you have to be able to hand it off to someone else before it gets too crazy. So it's the best way of doing it.
No, that's well, and actually that's probably a good point for us. I know we're right at the end of our 60 minutes, and I feel like we just touched the surface of this. So it is, first of all, I want to thank the panel and the discussion. I apologize for things we didn't get to, although I want to remind everybody that we will be posting the recording of this and the information on the site that you see here. I do want to remind folks also there's a special edition of Bike and Pedestrian FHWA Talking Traffic, which is coming up on Tuesday, November 12th, looking at TMG micromobility data formats, which is just a whole other worm. It seems like every question we answer in this field, we tend to find about 12 more new things to deal with. And so I hope that as we look at this, it seems like another thing that queues itself up for some type of workshop, because I think there's a lot we've just started to talk about today. But I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. I especially want to thank our panelists, Josh, Cassidy, and David, for sharing their experiences. And I want to encourage folks to be involved with the Bike Ped Data Subcommittee. Go to the website and see a lot of resources. There's some great things there. And of course, I guess I probably don't have to remind everybody that the annual meeting is coming up January 5th to 9th in DC. So for those that will attend, I don't know, is there are there any other last comments we have while we're still in here from our guests or our co-hosts?
I would say congratulations, guys, for keeping these programs running. It sounds like it's definitely a challenge to keep any program running, and then especially these count programs to get that funding consistent. So thanks for even keeping it alive. This is great examples for the rest of us.
Yeah, it's a tough business, and I think I'm going to maybe steal David's the dirty and data part of it. It's definitely rough. I think probably this is the only group of people who truly appreciate it. So we applaud you and everybody else who's doing this work. Well, that's it for today, folks. So thank you so much. keep an eye out. We'll be for future conversations with colleagues. If you have some ideas or things you want, feel free to contact myself or Will Rogers or Nathan, who's on the call here, Nathan Hicks. And yeah, we'll see you the next time. Thanks.